Hello! Sorry we're a little bit late. We just had a few login issues, but I'm delighted tonight to be with Robbie Britton, who is a coach, an ultra runner. He ran 650 kilometres across Jordan in 9.5 days in 2019, and he's now the very proud author of this excellent book, which I've just been reading, 1001 Running Tips, The Essential Runner's Guide. So welcome, Robbie. What have you been up to today?
Thanks for having me. I've been, where I live in northern Italy, we've had about 20 centimetres of snow, so I bravely stayed inside and rode on the turbo for most of today, only for a couple of hours. But yeah, just been enjoying looking out the window rather than actually going outside.
So how come you didn't run outside today, considering there is a whole chapter in your book dedicated to the environment? And one of those is how to run in cold weather, and it says mittens are best, but you can't do social media with them.
Yeah, no, I've got a race at the weekend, and I've had a bit of an Achilles niggle recently, so I didn't feel that going out and sliding around on fresh snow was the best use of my time today. Just felt a little bit too risky, so I stuck indoors, and I got a lot of work done as well. Actually, so it's quite nice when you kind of feel like you're cocooned in because of the environment. So I just I didn't brave it maybe.
Yeah, were you doing the work whilst you're on the turbo? Like, is it possible to do work on your turbo?
So I spoke to two of my athletes who were racing this weekend whilst on the turbo. So that, a little bit of work. It does help pass the time, and I did check that they were okay. It was only an easy ride, so I wasn't like.
You weren't just like, and then you've got to do this. Yeah. Okay. So what are you racing this weekend? That sounds exciting.
I am racing a 30k on the shores or the edge of Lake Garda. Northern Italy is one of the big lakes up here, and it's got, I think, 1,300 metres of climbing. It's my wife and I are both going over there, and she's a much better trail runner than I am. So it was mainly so she could race it, but I thought, well, I might as well enjoy a bit of a run out as well. So yeah, I'm 30 kilometres, 1,500 metres ish of climbing, 13 to 1,500 metres.
That's very hilly. It's very mountainous around there, isn't it? I ran in the Dolomites once, which I think is a bit further north than that, but it's such a beautiful area, isn't it? I'm really jealous of you living in Italy. What made you make the move out there?
We've been in Europe for a few years, and we were looking for somewhere a little bit cheaper than where we were, and my wife happened to find an apartment for €5,000.
Wow.
We're a smallish town, but it used to have a much bigger industry. It was the home of Fila, the sportswear brand.
Oh, okay.
So the Fratelli Fila's factory is opposite where we live, and it's empty now. And the population of the town's it's got a lot smaller than it was. It's about 1,000 people now instead of 2,000. So someone was just trying to get rid of where I think they'd grown up here, and they'd moved to Milan. And so we were like, we emailed them and said, I think you've made a mistake on your website. It shouldn't be this cheap. And they said, no, the guy just he'd tried to sell it for years and just was ready to get rid of it, I think. And we jumped in. We jumped at the chance. And that, 2 years ago, we haven't looked back since.
Brilliant. Oh, and so is there quite a community of runners there? Have you got quite a lot of friends made over the years?
So we're a little club called the Climb Runners. It's an interesting, it's an English name, but it's an Italian club out of the nearby city, Biella, and there's a couple of people, one of the local lads here, Francesco, who I actually met, he was on Strava, and I could see him on top of a lot of the leaderboards, and I sent him a message, and I think he ignored it, because he was like, who's this random geezer? So I went and I took one of his Strava crowns, so he'd make notice, and then he started, and we responded on there, and through them, and there's a few cyclists. There's a friend of mine who's a Dutch chap who runs a cycling B&B about 10 miles away in Valdugia, and so we've got cycling friends and running friends, and it's a really outdoorsy community in this kind of neighbourhood.
Oh, awesome! That's amazing. And so, what made you originally make the move to Europe in the first place? Was it just a bit rainy in the UK?
Rainy? I mean, it rains a fair bit here. I honestly wanted to try and do better in some of the European mountain races, and I thought the next logical step was going out to Europe more. But then, really, it became a decision about quality of life. It's just a really nice place to be, and to be in the environment. I'm from London. My wife's from Yorkshire, so she's much more used to the outdoors than I. But it's just an opportunity to live a life that we kind of dreamed of, and just taking chances and making it happen. So it's just about a better quality of life and doing things we can enjoy, things we love on a daily basis.
Brilliant. Oh, I love it. I'd love to live where you live. I'd love to live out there. Maybe one day, it's the dream. But yeah, so you were born and raised in London, as we can tell. So how did you first get into running? We'll get onto the book in a minute, by the way, just in case anybody's wondering. I just want a little bit of like a background, like who you are. So how did you get into running in the first place?
Well, that must be just over 12 years ago now. A friend of mine at university, I played all sports. I played football, American football, rugby, and often made up for my lack of physical stature and technical ability by running around a lot. And a friend of mine at the end of university, a chap called Adam Smith, he signed up for the Windermere Marathon. And I honestly signed up for it so he didn't have sole bragging rights within our group of friends. It would have been unbearable.
Yeah.
And then I ran just under 3 hours 15 on that course.
Wow.
And the bug a bit, and then did another one at Edinburgh. Went a bit slower because I got overexcited in the first half. And end of that year, I found the London to Brighton trail race and signed up just because it seemed a bit longer, seemed interesting. It was from somewhere I lived to somewhere that I'd go on holiday. I entered that, and then since then I've just been looking at different adventures and different races and enjoying it thoroughly.
Brilliant. And so were you always a coach, or did that come like after your interest in running?
So like, as a young, when I was like 13, 14, I coached football. So I've coached for a long, long time in sports. Coached for university of like our football, soccer teams, if anyone's American and listening. And then when I started running, I wrote this the other, I think it says it in the book actually, I started out as an athlete. We did a bit of coaching to support that lifestyle, and I think you see that a lot with ultra running athletes. It's a way to support what we want to do, and not very quickly, but the tables turned, and I'm a coach. It's my profession, I like to think, and I do a bit of running, I do a bit of cycling, but primarily I'm a coach, and I just love it. It's just like before I made the leap I was teaching geography in the outdoors with the Field Studies Council. And some other companies that in that kind of area where you get in the river and like GCSE kind of kids and just try to stop any of them drowning. And if they can learn a little bit about geography in the meantime, brilliant. So my background has always kind of been teaching and coaching in that regard. And I mean, the last 4 or 5 years, my coaching's progressed because I did an MSc with the University of Stirling in performance coaching, which is 2.5 years, and really, really helped me develop, not just as a coach, but as kind of helped me plot where I needed to go with my coaching as well in the future. And a lot of that probably trickled down into the book. And in the last couple of years, I've just been doing the IOC Sports Nutrition Diploma, so postgrad. It's a 2-year postgrad course in sports nutrition. All this stuff is kind of, it's just meant that I'm more of a coach now probably than an athlete. That's at least how I view myself. You'd have to chat to my athletes to see if that was the problem.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're really, really qualified, and I've been reading through the book, and your teaching and your style of writing really comes through in this book, and there's been several times where I've just laughed out loud because of something that you've read. I don't know if it's because I know you anyway, but I can hear your voice through this book, and it's just really, really wonderful. So if anybody wants a Christmas present, then I'll put the link to this book in the film description below as well. But just before I talk a bit more about the book, I do want to ask you about Jordan just for a couple of minutes, because we've got quite a few people interested in that. I'll just read out some hellos just so you can get a sense of some people. I'll just read out a few of them. So Marcus McDonald's here. He says hello. Leon Young's here. Jonathan Russell as well. And John Gardner says hi too. So hello you guys. And if anyone's got a question live for Robbie, then now is the time to type them in, because we're going to talk about Jordan first, and then we're going to talk about his book. So that was in, cast your mind back to 2019. Who can even remember that far back? You got a good long run in before the pandemic, huh? Why did you decide upon Jordan? Because it's not an area that you hear people doing a lot of running in, is it? Like, it's not like it's not like Chamonix.
Well, originally the idea was to go to Siberia, and I had different teammates because Lake Baikal is it's the longest lake in the world, or the deepest, one of the two. The biggest by volume. There's lots of different things about it that make it wonderful, and it entirely freezes in the winter, and you can run the length of it. A few people have done that. So I was trying to do that, and I've been out there with Nats, and I've been out to recce and camp on the ice and stuff. And unfortunately, I just ran out of teammates that were good at coping with the cold, and I was left with not left with, but like the option that I had was I'll find a picture. Well, he's in here every year. Mr. Daniel Allen Lawson, this wonderful chap. Here, looking at a map as if he knows what it means. And,
yeah, because he usually runs in circles, doesn't he, around a track?
Yeah, we do. We both enjoy some circular running, and yeah, so Dan's not great in the cold. I didn't fancy like carrying Dan for 8 days, frozen solid, and having to resuscitate him at the end. So or
on a sledge with huskies.
Yeah, slightly warmer. That suited him more than it suited me. And somewhere interesting, so a friend of ours, Dave McFarland, he come out and he made a film. And another friend, James Vincent, he took some nice pictures. And for them, as kind of creating that stuff, it's like they wanted something a bit more interesting. Siberia and us maybe freezing to death, yeah, that's plenty interesting. And then when I pitched a few different locations, and shameless to say, like it really was just looking at where it was quite cheap to fly. So scouring some of the budget airlines. Jordan come up as they had a recent Ryanair connection from Budapest to Jordan that made it super cheap. Yeah, this is all like again, and so we looked at Alfie Pierce Higgins and Mohammed Swaiti. I probably got his name pronounced incorrectly there, so I apologise for that. They had run it before and set a record of about 12, 13, 14. We're not quite sure what their record was because it involved rest days and hospital visits and some of them running. Yeah, that was a strange one. And yeah, so Dan knew Alfie and he asked him about it, and the idea just blossomed from that. And it's a kind of like my first master's at university was in archaeology, and so the chance to go and see, I did geography and archaeology. I've always loved geography, and then to combine that, all my loves, running, traveling, kind of being with people I like, and seeing like this amazing landscape. And also the likes of Petra, it was just it kind of ended up being a bit of a no-brainer. It's just an absolutely stunning part of the world, and like from a cultural point of view, it was very different to what we'd done in the past. But just the people were so lovely. Like the thing we heard like most is like "Welcome to Jordan. How can we help you?" And that was just straight away. Like everyone was just really lovely. Apart from the dogs, they were quite aggressive. Recently, there was a lady who's actually out there. At the moment, has had her trip curtailed after being bitten by a dog. So I was reading a blog. Yeah, it proper got into her leg. She was on like the first couple of days. They're really they're like sheepdogs, like guarding the livestock. Yeah. But they got like these bondage necklaces. One of them, like we were seeing it, and it become like it had spikes coming out of the necklace. Like, and you're like, am I like some kind of weird club in London, or is this really?
Oh my goodness, that's not hilarious. I'd be really scared if I saw a dog coming to me wearing that kind of thing. But that sounds horrendous, but it looks beautiful. Like I've just managed to find a picture of you guys running through the desert there. Like, is that in a wadi, like what they call those waterways?
We went through the slot canyons that, I mean, I'm like 200-300 meters of sheer wall either side. And like the first one we got to was on a shorter day. And we had to change a couple of bits because it was a bit tougher than we'd thought. And like the underfoot conditions there, that's actually one of the good days.
Very rocky, is it, underfoot?
Well, it was more, I've said this a few times, it was like an idea of a trail rather than a physical trail. It was a really, like they connected things up. Like, yeah, that'd be brilliant. Oh yeah, this would be brilliant. When you get there and you'd be like, I can't actually see a trail. And you're supposed to go out. So like the wadis helped because they obviously
you can only really go one direction in a wadi. It's like sheer cliffs either side. That must be helpful.
It was good, and we kind of just like wary of flash floods, but also kind of it was I think it was the Wadi Al Alamein or Alamia. It was between Petra and the Wadi Rum, which is famous, like it's used in big movies and stuff, and it's an absolutely stunning like a moon landscape. But this one was like 20-30k of just sheer walls either side of you.
Wow.
And it was just absolutely kind of. I had a saying. I kept saying to the crew, we can't. There's a book by a chap called Martin Lindsay about a 1930s expeditions to Greenland, and he says one cannot exhaust one's superlatives too early in an expedition.
Yeah.
And it was so that we knew the Wadi Rum was coming, we knew Petra was coming, and the first few days you're seeing things again that was just fantastic and amazing. But if we run out of words by the end. If we'd have started by being so blown away by everything, by the end of the trip, it really was just mind-blowingly amazing to see some of these. And I don't use those type of words lightly.
Yeah. It's just totally different to what's in the UK and Europe, isn't it? It's just completely different, like the sheer white or the sheer pink cliffs, and it's just amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And then you mentioned Jordan, so that's the famous entrance to Jordan, the beautiful sand castles, isn't it? Like stuff carved into sandstone, and you just go through these rocks and it just appears in front of you. It's just absolutely beautiful. So like, at what point was was Petra on your trip? Was it near the end or in the beginning?
It was about 6 days. We at the end of one day we got into Little Petra, which is one of the earliest settlements, and then the start of the next day we went through Petra itself. And we came in from the back end of it. What are the names? Because there's the treasury and the other bit. We came in at the back, and our first sight was this huge, like it's carved into the stone before. Like it just even on this the picture there you've got of the building that we ran into there. We actually went back and took a couple of pictures afterwards because we were rushing through early in the morning, and like we wanted to spend as much time there as possible. And we didn't come through that way. We'd actually left before we got to that the first time. Took a right before we got to the nice bit. But you look at that building, and there's little kind of divots on the side where they climbed up and built the. And it's just
with no ropes, presumably, like no safety. Like they might have had scaffolding a bit, maybe, but like they'll just climb up there and chip another bit off.
Yeah, I get, like, again, we don't know. Yeah, there's so little known about it, and it was kind of left empty for many years, or there's kind of people like living in there quite roughly. And now it's one of the most ridiculously breathtaking things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like. When we talk about people not running in Jordan, it was a totally different experience. But there was little bits as well, like they had the Dana Biosphere, which is like a really big U-shaped valley, and we came to there's a really nice little kind of settlement at the top of this valley before you drop down into it, and then this wonderful trail the whole way along it. And I think there's pictures I'll have a look in a sec, but it's kind of just the whole valley like that is open up. And you come to the head of it right at the top, and it's just like in full bloom. I think we weren't even there in the best season for it, but it was. And then you wound down in and run through the middle of it, and it was just breathtaking, especially with like the light in that kind of environment as well. It's just there were so many moments like that where, especially as we'd taken our time over the trail, we'd get to points and it really felt like we'd earned these kind of special things. In some places you were in, like the first slot canyon we got to was in the middle of nowhere. No one else was going to visit it unless they were on the Jordan Trail. So it felt like our little secret, and it was ours to enjoy just ourselves. And like they had the 3 main wadis at one point further down, and you drop into them and then climb out again. And it was just the size and scale of it all was just brilliant. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a place to visit on foot.
However if there's is there one day that people can go and do, like if there's like a 1 day route that you could recommend to people, which bit would you recommend that they do?
Weird, right? Because I guess if you went and say to Wadi Rum, it's a big open space and there's lots of like jeeps and we stayed in a Bedouin camp there and stuff. Like it's not something you would go and run. Like it's part of that journey. It's same with Petra. It's busy. Right, if you're there in the middle of the day, it's very busy, and we got special permission to run through from one end to the other in the early hours of the morning.
Cool.
It wouldn't be the 2 places. It's the most popular places, most well known. I mean that, like actually logistically, that long slot canyon that we run up the Wadi Alamein, I think it was called. I'm going to probably butchered that as well.
Oh, they'll find it.
That was brilliant, but like as a day run, it wouldn't work because we had to run to the start. Like we had to run 30-40k from Petra to get there, and we actually wild camped overnight, and then we had to carry on the next day. So maybe the Dana Biosphere, because you can stay at the top, you could drop down into this absolutely ridiculous valley, explore a bit. There was somewhere to stay at the other end. There was like a bio hotel at the other end, and then you could come back and like where we stayed in Dana itself, there was like these little kind of caved dwelling style, like rustic buildings that have been rebuilt to like kind of repurposed as a hotel, and that was really, really nice. But there was so many of it. There was a big town called Karak in the middle. It was just kind of like built up like a fort. So then to come into it, we had to go through these wadis as well. So there's lots. The north of Jordan is a lot greener than you might expect, and that was just that in itself was very kind of eye-opening to us. There was a lot of greenery. Like the mountains were totally different to the big deserts in the south. So yeah, picking one day would probably be the Dana Biosphere, Dana.
Cool.
But in general, it's the whole. There's such a different feeling to a lot of that trail.
People will have to watch the film. Where can they watch it?
That one is if you search Dave McFarland, dm2.media, I think is his website. It's called Lost Dogs and Englishmen, and that one is free to watch. And I would also, if you do enjoy that movie, I would highly recommend the not follow up as such, but Dan Lawson ran Le Jog in under 10 days. That was last summer, and Dave made a film there as well. That one costs about £3.50, but I would look at watching both of them as a 2-for-1. I highly recommend it. Dave did a brilliant job in both of those, and I'd say that about the first one. I'm obviously biased because I'd love to see myself running around on a camera. Although when you look, you can tell that I have definitely got injuries that need sorting. And then the one about Le Jog is what Dan did there was an absolutely it was one of the kind of the top British performances in terms of multi-day road stuff. But going, so yeah, two very nice videos. Dave McFarland made.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. I'm going to look them up. I've just made a note of those. I'm going to look them up, and I'm going to put a link to these in the film description below, or if people are listening on the podcast version later, then it will be in the podcast description as well. Brilliant. So it sounds amazing. You've totally sold it to me. I'm going to go and run in Jordan now. I'm going to go head to Dana and run around there. But we better talk about your book for a bit, because that is the reason that we're here. Sorry?
I'll just quickly add that the current record holder for the Jordan Trail is now Amy Sproston. So it's a female-held record as well. So I think it's even more. And she's someone that's like, she lives out there and she knows it probably even better than I and Dan. So that was always just quite a cool thing to. Like, I chatted to her before she tried out on the record and stuff, and she also had a really brilliant experience of the trail. So there's more and more people seeing it, and more stories around that. Quite an exciting part of the world.
Amazing. Oh, that's great. So can you remember what her record is? Did she totally annihilate it?
I think we were like 9.5 and she was under 9. I can't remember. I was putting myself to check before I did this call, but it was probably just my ego was too damaged to
was she making a film though? Because if you had to keep running back and forth for making this film, that must have slowed you down a little bit.
I think we only ran back once at the start because the film guys, Dave and James, were like, "Oh, come up here, it's a really good view." And we ran up there, and I kind of told them off. I was like, "We are still here to set a record." I mean, like me and Dan, we got lost a fair bit. We did quite a big diversion for finding a dog and stuff, but it's nothing else. Like Amy just ran a better run over that. She's a fantastic athlete, and she ran it quicker than we did. There's no going back and forth for a film or anything. There's never. If we wanted to go quicker, we would have to put our foot on it a bit more. I think that's all we could have left it to.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, hopefully we'll see that record fall and more interest in the trail as well. But all your experience has basically I read this. Well, I haven't read all of it. I've dipped in and out because I felt like that was a good way to read this book. Like the tips are very kind of dippy in and out. Like there's just lots of different little bits and bobs in there that you can dip in and out of. But reading it, I just felt like it was a compilation of everything that you've learned over the years, like all your courses, like all your university stuff and your diplomas, and also just you as an athlete yourself, kind of distilling all this information, all this hard-won information into one handy book for everybody to just use and benefit from. So like, was that easy to do, like like comparing it to running an ultra or training for an ultra? How hard was it for you to kind of just, it's a different skill, isn't it, writing a book? How hard was it?
Yeah, like I've always written as part of like of my involvement in the sport, be it for different websites or like helping out other little books and stuff like that. So like, actually, I ended up doing like I got a whiteboard, trusty whiteboard, instead. I can't work out a calendar or anything, and I just drew like that kind of big Blue Peter kind of chart where you colour in it each bit closer to the target. I just set off. We had a good structure beforehand, but like, what do we want to include in this book? And then I let my kind of enthusiasm for different subjects on different days dictate what I was writing. So I was this is my stand-up desk that I'm at here, that's made of 2 wooden apple crates. It's very fancy. And I'm just typing away, and I would write about things I wanted to write about. And then if I was a bit tired about writing about a certain subject, I might like tap into another one that I had a few ideas around, and come back to the subject that was a bit taxing a bit later on. And it was over probably 2 months, like this time last year, where I just kind of, as anything, I'm competitive with myself. So I just made sure that I was getting through it, enjoying it, but putting in like a decent shift of writing each day. I think for me it's similar to like running, right? You can only do so much before you're exhausted, and the quality of it wanes, or the motivation for it wanes. So I very much treated the writing task as I would my training, and I did it. And when it suited me, I kind of built my training around it that time. If I was low on motivation or kind of inspiration for ideas, I went for a run or ride my bike, and then come back and I had new ideas. Or and I think one of the things as well, like, that has helped me come up with a lot of these ideas, my own running career definitely is in those pages, but all the running of the athletes I've worked with over the years, because it kind of amplifies the experience. Like, I can learn from my mistakes, but I'm also learning from the successes and failures of the people I've worked with. And as you learn together, and that's like, for me, that's how I coach. I try and make it an educational thing, but it's not just the athlete learning. I'm learning from every single person that I work with, and then that gets distilled. Like, a few people as well, like, have come back and said, one of the tips they really liked was getting your number before a race and crumpling it up, and then kind of, so it doesn't kind of flap around as much, and it contour. And my wife keeps going, like, that's my tip. Like, where's the code?
Yeah.
Natalie, like, it's a team effort. There's plenty of pictures of you in it. But, people, and she's like, that's my tip.
Oh, that's one thing I really enjoyed reading the book, was the style of it, and just like every few tips or so, you're just like, I was just laughing out loud, like especially like all the way. I've picked my favourite tip, which is tip 994. There are really 1,001 tips in here, and it's about social media, and it says, don't waste too much time on social media. If you find you haven't got the time to get out of the door for a 30 to 45 minute run, delete all your social media apps and you'll have the time for an ultra every day. And I just thought that is so funny. Like, it's just really true, isn't it, about everything these days. So yeah, I appreciated that one, and I think if I didn't have to do it for work, I would definitely do that one.
As I said to you before, like, and an idea that come from my coach Tom Craig's, I put timers on my social media apps, and it's made me much more productive with the time I do spend on it. I'm like, I better get this tweet done I'm supposed to do, that's kind of work related. I'll do this tweet, and instead of like spending the next hour scrolling through, I don't know, different reels on Instagram or different kind of threads that kind of, you end up into the dark space of America or something, you just like, in, out, done. Right now I've got more time. What do I do now? I'll go for a run.
Yeah.
Much better.
Yeah.
That's the second tip, though.
Yeah, it's a really good tip, and then the last tip is really funny, because you say, don't listen to me about social media, I'm an old man now, and like, how old are you? Like, you're not even 40 yet, I wouldn't have thought. And then yeah, it's just funny. And you've said, I'll be sitting in the corner reading an old-fashioned proper book and grumbling about the youth of today.
I'm not even on TikTok. What do I know about social media if I'm not on TikTok?
Yeah, no, I'm not on TikTok either. I did consider it the other day though, because I was watching some TikTok stuff and they're all dancing around, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I could dance around and do something on TikTok. It just seems like a lot of effort to me.
A lot of it, I guess as well, if you're a good dancer, then TikTok is the option. I like to, so I'm less likely to do anything. Like my wife Natalie is very good at taking pictures, so her favourite is Instagram. Mine's favourite is probably Twitter, because I can write things and then just kind of leave it alone. But that's become a bit more of a cesspool of late anyway. So it's like, which one do you suit the most? The same as picking a race or anything. Like what plays to your strengths? So if you've got some mad dancing skills, I highly recommend TikTok. If you're like me, you have 2 left feet and 0 rhythm, then don't go on there, I don't think, unless it's you consider yourself particularly funny.
That should be one of your tips, shouldn't it? It's 1,002 tips now. There's lots of different chapters. Like the way the book works is that you've divided it into these really handy chapters. I'm just going to show people just there. So there's just there's the basics, there's some training, there's skills and techniques, there's how to run in lots of different environments, your body, racing, kit and gear, travelling around, and then stuff, which I especially like right at the end there. And then there's a reading list at the end, which is interesting because somebody has written quite a controversial question about that's related to your book, but then also not related to your book. So yeah, it's just really nicely organised. I just wondered if you had, was there a chapter that you enjoyed the most, like that is the most close to your heart, or was the whole thing just a smorgasbord of dipping in and out?
I really enjoyed writing about sleep deprivation.
Oh, why is that?
Well, I've been doing a lot more ultra-distance cycling the last couple of years, and I think obviously, again, I'm not as quick as everyone else, so I'm trying to figure out if I can just sleep a bit less. And I think there's a really interesting area there where you're looking at if you, the phrase was, if like sleep deprivation and getting really sleepy to do with adenosine building up in your brain, and adenosine builds up quicker if metabolic demand outweighs supply. Right, so the 2 ways we can impact that is either increase the supply of energy coming in or reduce the amount of effort going out. So in theory, if you reduce, when you get to the night time, if you reduce your effort a little bit and keep your food kind of up, you'll be surprised at how well you can weather the storm of sleep deprivation. So I've been, and a couple of my athletes, especially the bike ones, have been working on some stuff around that, and it's been very fascinating to talk to different people and try and figure some bits and bobs like that out. So yeah, that's one of the areas I like. But I mean, also things around perception of efforts. There's a bit about sports psychology. I'm no expert on the subject. There are plenty of brilliant experts out there, and that's one of the reasons we had the reading list at the end there. It's one of the ones, I think it's Carla, I can't even pronounce her surname. No. Carla Maijen. She's an endurance performance in sport. She's like a researcher into human psychology and sports psychology, and like plenty of experts like that out there. And one of them is Dr. Samuel Makora, and his is around perception of effort and how that massively changes what we do. So all the physical information that comes up to our head is still interpreted. So yeah, you can absolutely kind of blow a gasket in a race, and 2 people can be in a completely identical situation, but having different experiences of that identical physical situation. So I often use the experience, and this is what I like, Ryan. I quite enjoyed these chapters because it's a subject that I'm still learning about quite a lot. But if you've got 2 runners who are at mile 20 of a marathon, right? They've had identical races at this point, identical training. They've got the same fancy super shoes, the same fancy outfits, and they're at mile 20, and they're both running 6-minute miles. But runner number 1 is being overtaken by people, and runner number 2 is overtaking people. One of the physical situation is identical, but one of those runners is going to have an easier time of it, and that's because one of their perceptions of their effort is completely changed by the people overtaking. Whereas if you're overtaking people, you feel like you're on top of the world, and actually the physical thing's the same. Yeah. But the psychological impact it has on us is totally different.
Yeah, perceived effort is so interesting, isn't it? And I remember that you wrote something about a lion popping out as well. Like, you can give it your all. You think you're giving it your all, but actually you've always got a little bit more in a tank. For example, if a lion was to pop out of you and try and catch you. So I thought that was really interesting as well.
I always use that one as well when describing like a threshold effort to someone. And you can say, you get into a lab and you want to be between like 1 and 2 millimoles of blood lactate, and like people are saying, what's that even mean? Well, I don't go down a lab, right? But I kind of say to people like, well, if you're doing this run and you're out there, it's a controlled effort. You want to be ready in case I come out of the bushes or a lion come out of the bushes, that you're not quite at full pelt. And it just kind of, it's a controlled effort, and you're ready for, if it's a 30-minute threshold effort, if I popped out of a bush at 30 minutes in and said, I need you to do 10 more minutes, you wouldn't be too alarmed. You'd be like, okay, I can do that. And that was kind of just different ways of explaining certain sessions. I don't know if that's in there, but it's definitely helped talk through different sessions.
That's definitely in there as well. And we've got a couple of live questions about training, if you're game for that. So Train Like a Horse says, is it true that the only way to get faster after a point is to lose weight? Can excess weight ruin your progress no matter how hard you train? That's an interesting one.
It's an interesting question, and it's obviously quite a loaded one because people have different relationships with food, different body compositions, and different optimum racing weights. One of the reasons I did the sports nutrition diploma was because I was, quite frankly, scared to give nutritional advice because of the impact it can have on different people. And different people listening to this now, I have to be careful what I say, because one person may take it, it may help them improve their running. One person may take the same piece of advice and it becomes quite damaging. What I would say is look into what your optimum kind of racing weight or composition is. And it varies for everyone. It's to do with different heights, like body shapes, body sizes, and what you're training for. And I think a little bit of experimentation is fine. If you're kind of concerned, or you're concerned about a friend who's dropped a lot of weight quickly, or anything like that, it's just worth like talking to professionals in these regards. And even myself, like even after a 2-year postgrad in sports nutrition, I wouldn't consider myself someone that you would go to. I would be looking at registered dietitians. So with regards to weight, I would say look for your optimum, like what your optimum one's for a performance. And there is people think that losing weight, like I think there's a difficult one. You can tell I'm stumbling a little bit because some like losing weight won't make you faster, and that's not true. We do know it's true. We have to. There is a positive correlation, but it's not a linear one that continues on forever. So there's a point where if you start losing muscle mass, or you're not healthy, it affects your immune system, it affects the consistency of your training, then that's going to have a negative effect. So it's just being aware of all the factors at play, and making that, like, I would advise, if you want to try and push things to any kind of limits, to speak to a registered dietitian and see if they can help you do it safely. But yeah, it's not always lighter equals faster. I like to think of stronger equals faster, but if I get stronger and just solely eat cheeseburgers for the next 6 months, I won't get faster. I might get stronger and lift other things. But it's important to understand that it does have a role within your within performance. But the other thing you get to is performance and health. The top end of performance isn't always healthy either. Like if you had to pick a top Tour de France cyclist and you stood them there, like Chris Froome took his top off, and then you took someone like in a different sport or like a sprinter, and you said which one of these people looks healthy, most people aren't going to pick Chris Froome. No, like poor fella, he's got like a skill, like no shoulders. You wouldn't trust him up. Could you open this jar for me, Chris? Like, you're not going to go through to open a jar of jam that's really stuck on. And it's that kind of battle between performance and health. And maybe I'm doing Chris Froome a disservice here. He might be brilliant at opening.
He is a major fan of Wild Ginger Running podcast and film interviews.
But the short answer to that is that I'm terrified of giving out advice that people could take the wrong way on that subject. But it's important. It is worth considering.
Yeah.
It isn't a continuous, if I lose weight I will always get faster. We probably all have an optimum weight for performance, but actually you see people, there are instances where people put on weight they become more consistent, they become stronger, and their performances increase that way. So if you are like regularly picking up colds, if you are regularly injured, and you are someone who feels like they have to try and lose weight all the time to get faster, there could be other ways to improve your performance, and it's worth just maybe talking to someone with a little bit more knowledge around the subject.
Very good answer. I think that's excellent. Thank you, Robbie. I've got a question about you, and it's from somebody called Orange Goblin, who says, at what age or stage in your running career did you decide that you needed to run these crazy distances? So I don't know what the definition of crazy is there. To some people that is a marathon, but I'm presuming they mean like the track stuff where you run for 24 hours and all your ultras and the Cross Jordan.
I think it comes back to our discussion of perception of effort, right? Because our perception of normal is impacted by our peer groups. So if you sit around a table with a bunch of people who've finished the Tour de France or the Grand Union Canal Race or the Lakeland 100 multiple times, and then you talk about what's normal, like the fact that I want to do a 5K is abnormal to those guys. The fact that I spend a bit of time, and if I talk to my 24-hour, like the squad that we have there, and said, "Oh guys, I'm going to do and girls, I'm going to do a 5K focus. Anyone want to join me?" I'm getting no takers. I'm getting absolutely no takers. So I suppose, yeah, for me it was a gradual. Like, I did the first couple of marathons in May of 2009, and straight away I was looking for more challenges, and the London to Brighton one just popped up. It just I don't know how I found it, and I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenge. I've always seen my kind of most valuable trait as just trying as hard as possible and being kind of stubborn and persistent. So that kind of plays well to ultra running. So I aim for that, and from there it just became like a stepping stones, longer distances, trying to get faster, doing races that were long enough that I could win, which was 100 miles and above, and then you end up in a circle of people and circle of friends where it's perfectly normal. I feel sorry for Natalie. When she met me, she'd done the Bob Graham when she was younger, but she was a fell runner, mountain runner for very short distances. And within a couple of years, she'd signed up and done a 60k. And then we were in the Aosta Valley in Italy, and around a table with people who she knew, who she'd just seen finish the Tour de France. Although her longest race was 60k, all of a sudden it was totally normal for her that people like herself and her peers around the table might do such an event. So we tossed a coin. She let me toss the coin, which is a false mistake. Ended up as the person doing the Tour de France the next year, and she went from 60k straight up to 338k and 120 hours of racing. And yeah, that's a monumental leap. And I will warn people, I wouldn't advise that often. It's if you've got a light kind of running up and down mountains like Natalie had, the main factor in those long mountain stuff is the being a little bit ineffective or kind of inefficient on a descent and causing a lot of damage. And Natalie goes downhill with the same way like a cyclist rolls downhill. There's just no impact on the muscles. It's brilliant to watch. But yeah, that's what normal was to her then. So I would say, yeah, for me it was a kind of just a gradual progression into abstract behaviour. But if you want to kind of, if you've got aspirations of doing some longer stuff, then to make some friends with people to do races, and all of a sudden it won't quite feel as abnormal to you.
That's excellent. And of course, buy the book for a load of tips and training. We've just got time for one last question. It's quite good because you alluded to this earlier. So Marcus McDonald says, as well as your book, what books would you recommend for self-coaching? Because I know you do have a reading list at the back here with lots of different books, but like, is there one that's really inspired you that you just think everybody else should read?
So it's interesting, right? So for self-coaching, I almost think there's not, like, I'd like to think my book is a good one, not because it has all the information, but my role, my kind of part of it was to try and put you on the right path. So there is a section on do you need a coach and what should I do in that regard. And for me, coaching, if you're self-coached or if you are a coach yourself, it's just about constantly trying to learn more. So like my favourite reference point, I absolutely adore Google Scholar. Right, I love just trying to find out about certain. It doesn't mean there's like loads of different. You can't type in there, and there's obviously skills involved in reading an academic paper. But there's loads of little kind of nuggets that I've picked up over the years that are my favourite little articles. Be it like there's one from 1989 looking at Yanis Kouros on the Sydney to Melbourne, and all he eats the whole way across. So like, yeah, my feelings always go towards some of that kind of more academic stuff. But I would look at, so when I did the work with Stirling University, it wasn't about this is how you coach. It was how to develop as a coach. So I would definitely, I mentioned about Carol Dweck's mindset. That's the one I would recommend to people out of that list there. And it's more about how to improve your own kind of mindset around development and how you're kind of like, it's a growth mindset it's around. So it's kind of having this mindset that you want to improve and keep improving, and how almost for me, I quite like thinking of not chasing failure, but not being afraid of it either, and learning as much as you can from each opportunity that you get in life. So probably Carol Dweck would be the one where I would say, like, read that, and then you're going to get there. That's about how you get the right mindset to improve as a coach or as someone self-coaching, rather than, there's plenty of really good books that you can pick up. I don't follow Tim Noakes on Twitter these days. He's gone full tinfoil hat conspiracy, but like The Law of Running, or Daniel's Running Form, or like Steve Magnus has got The Science of Running, which is a really nice book to read. It goes through like a lot of the different types of sessions, and there's some really nice inspiring stuff in there. There's so much information on like my website, fastrunning.com, but like loads of information out there. There's almost too much information these days. So rather than telling people you should be reading this, that, or the other, I would develop the skills to find out what you need to learn and kind of get in the right mindset there. So that's another. Yeah, it's a non-answer almost. But although I did say,
that's good. I'll put a link. I've just made a note of that book, Mindset by Carol Dweck, and I'll put a link to that in the film description and the podcast notes below as well. And we've just had one last question come in from John Gardner, which I really must ask, because he is the first person that supported me on Patreon. So he's a top fan of the channel. He wants to know your opinion about training 80% of your time at a lower heart rate for endurance, because there's that whole 80-20 rule that Ian Sharman definitely talks about, and a lot of other coaches talk about. So where do you stand on the whole 80-20 low heart rate, high heart rate business?
The 80-20 stuff is made popular by Matt Fitzgerald's books in the US, but actually it comes back to Professor Stephen Seiler, who's a Texan guy who's based in Norway, and I address it in the book. I have tried to send a copy out to Professor Seiler. I would love to have a read of this book. It's interesting. It's definitely like, it's one I like to kind of to have as a foundation of my own coaching. It's not always the right thing for each individual situation, because it can vary. Right, we're talking, and a lot of the research comes from the Scandinavian countries. Not just the endurance running, but also their cross-country skiing, which they're massive at. They're also big in the cycling at the moment. And the 80-20 as a kind of set fast rule, you can interpret it in slightly different ways. You could look, okay, well, say you're 20% of the week. Is that 20% of your sessions involve times when you go above the second lactate threshold? Or does that, like, do I count 4 by 5 minutes? Do I only count the 5 minutes? Is that only 20 minutes? And how does that work? Or if you have slightly lower mileage and you're coming into training and you had 80-20, you're only running 4 hours a week. Maybe actually, if you're only running a small amount of time in your week, there is a bit more benefit to doing things a little bit more steady, because you've got the recovery needed to do it. So I think there is a common error we see where people run their easy running too hard. And this is one of the things that 80-20, Seiler's research with a bunch of other people, it looked at the difference between recreational, sub-elite and elite runners, and it looked at their training. And the difference between recreational and sub-elite was the polarization of the training. So like the recreational guys, a lot of it was in the middle. Right, it was the sub-elite, it was polarized. There was a lot easy, and then it was that bit that the 80-20 split was that they looked at. Right, so that's good. So what that tells us is either everyone who's not good enough is running too much in the middle and it's not getting the adaptations they need, or everyone who's not good enough, but the recreational runners, they're running their easy run so hard that they can't do that much of it, because the difference between the sub-elite and the elite was the volume of training they did. And it's not always the be-all and end-all, but in that situation, between the people that did get their training like polarized, they were then doing more. Because I like to think that if you're 80% easy enough, you can increase the overall volume, because you're not bashing the life out of yourself. If you try as hard as possible, you're never going to bump it up. And even, like, I think it was on one of Silas' podcasts, he spoke about working with the Norwegian cross-country skiing team. They were going as far as 90% of their training of the lower intensity, 10% higher. But you've got to remember, you're talking about people doing 35, 40 hours of training a week. So they're still doing 4 or 5 hours above that intensity. And then we love like a one size fits all. It's brilliant, right? It's much easier, but it's not always that simple. You can't take studies that come from people that train 20, 30 hours a week and then put that straight down onto someone who's like a parent of 2 small children that's got a 9-to-5 job and like an elderly parent they look after in the evenings, and they only run 4 hours a week, and you say, well, it's got to be 80-20. There's a real mix to it. So that, my opinion is brilliant research. There's some really good, like that's another one where I would look up the research written, because the one of the ones by Silo that looks into it, it's really readable. It's not like it's that, sometimes it's, even this word itself for me, esoteric, that I didn't know what that meant before I learned it.
I don't know if I actually know what that means, actually. Does it mean like hard going?
No, esoteric is like written in a way that's understandable to only a very small audience. That's my understanding.
Yeah, hard going.
So like, you go, it's kind of academic writing can be very esoteric in that only the academics understand it, right? And even the word to describe it is in itself esoteric. You're like, I don't even know what that means. Yeah. But that's not for me. I'm from the lower classes. I shall stick with my Beano comic. But the papers they've written there is readable. There's nice, like, it's written in a way that I can understand it. That you actually, someone is self-coaching or kind of a bit more intrigued about it, and they've read some of the books or the more popular articles. I'd recommend going and looking that way. Go and have it like chat to some other people that maybe, or chat to coaches down your local club. Like reach out. Stephen Silo is fantastic on social media, on Twitter. He's brilliant. Like interact with him on there and send him questions. And it's I'm definitely a fanboy. So I'm a self-admitted fanboy of Professor Stephen Silo and the 80-20 approach and the theories. But it's just, as with anything, it's not one size fits all. It is an underlying fundamental part of how I coach, but it's not how I coach for every single individual I work with. Yeah. And it also, if you're training for 5K or below, or you're a middle distance runner, again, changes all over. So it's that's another long answer to a short question.
No, that's a really good answer, and I really appreciate that, Robbie. It's brilliant. And we're just going to end with one final question, which is you're doing coaching still. It's like a lifelong journey, isn't it? The coaching. You've done ultra running. You've done the run across Jordan. You've now written a book. Like, Emma Morton wants to know what is next.
What's next? So, the last couple of years I've done some ultra cycling, and I managed to win one of those races. But there's one called the Trans-Pyrenees that I DNF'd it. It was the first one I did. And I do want to go back there and try. It's the organisers of the Transcontinental. There's some wonderful films about that bike race on YouTube and stuff. So hopefully next year, the last couple of years it's not gone ahead, and I really want to do that. And I would love to get back to doing some more 24-hour and longer running. And unfortunately, I've had a bit of a long-term injury that, whilst it didn't stop me running across Jordan, if you do watch the Jordan video, I look like someone's like secretly shot me with a bow and arrow from the side. I could go a long way in a fair bit of pain for quite a long time, but I was very far from the performance athlete that I wish to be, and I'm working my way back to that. I'm back up to doing some decent training, and I'm doing a lot of work with a physio here in Pry, which is our next town along, Elenia, and she's been helping me a lot with like my proprioception, balance, and so next is hopefully to go back and do some 100-mile ultras, and to do them as fast as possible, and some bicycling, some riding some bikes around.
Sounds like a good life. It's brilliant. That sounds great. And you can all follow. What did you say your preferred one is? Twitter. People want to follow you on Twitter. That's the best one.
I'm great on social media. Twitter, I just interact every now and again and just retweet stuff. If you really like, most of my stuff's on fast running. So if you look on fast running social media, I do dabble in the Instagram. I quite enjoy putting pictures of if you like pictures of dogs. Or just pictures of my face looking tired, or my wife away down a hill. These are the main things I post on Instagram.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's been a real success this evening. We've had lots of really good questions, and lots of people are saying really nice things now about you. If you have anything more to say nice about Robbie, then do type it now, because I'm going to read them all out to him, just to make him feel good about this hour that he has given to us. It's very generous of you, Robbie. So Train Like a Horse says, thank you very much for replying to my question. Big smiley face. Marcus McDonald says, thanks Robbie, also a smiley face. Lena Genemark says, thank you from Sweden. Orange Goblin said a big thumbs up for answering their question as well. John Gardner says, interesting, I didn't know about the history, the subtleties and the elite versus amateur with the whole 80-20 thing. And he says, thanks Robin. And Move More Now says, is your knee back to normal yet? Oh, that's another question.
It's getting there. It's not normal. It may never be normal again, but I'm 2 knee surgeries down. American football injury from when I jumped. It was the first one. But it's definitely improving, and I can. My balance is a little bit less wonky. Paul Tierney, I think you might have had I don't know. He helped me a lot with working on my feet, because they were basically, I looked like a duck just standing around. I was on the edges of my feet, and we did a lot of re-education of my feet and loads of little things. That's that frustrating thing, isn't it? When you've got a long-term injury, you just want to hit it with a hammer and fix it and have like an instant fix, and it's months and months, or sometimes years of doing tiny little things that don't really feel any different, and then one day you can run properly again.
Well, we wish you all the best. It really is a fantastic book, and there will be a link to it, 1001 Running Tips by Robbie Britton, in the film description or the podcast notes below, so do check that out. Thank you so much, Robbie. It's been lovely to see you, lovely to speak to you. Thanks for all your amazing advice, and we'll let you go for your evening out there in Italy.
I'm going to bed. Hour ahead out.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, for helping share the book with other people.
Well, I hope you get loads of sales now, and thank you so much for chatting to us tonight.
Cheers.
Cool. See you. Bye.